Okay, 2007 2 litre Mondeo fuel filter replacement. It's under the back axle, rear wheels. It's up in this canister here. Now, there a container underneath it, 18mm bolt at the bottom. That will allow you to drain the filter. So I'll undo the 18mm and let it drain. And then we'll undo the main housing. Filter is a cartridge filter, sits inside. So I'll undo this, let it drain, and then we'll loosen this off. Okay, so once that's stopped draining, close it back up. If for whatever reason this doesn't stop draining and it continues to flow till you've got more fuel than you think should be in this, loosen the main housing, because otherwise it will be siphoning from the fuel tank straight out and at the bottom, and you'll be going forever until it drains the fuel tank. Obviously, to undo this, you're going to need some jaws of some description. Loosen it off and undo the housing. And there's a filter. This one's not too bad, but it's been done last year. Just pull the filter out. And then you can empty the rest of your fuel out. That's where we put in a new one. New filter, new O-ring. The O-ring sits in there, little tab to pull it out. Put your new O-ring in, get your filter and push it up inside so it locates through that hole. So we get that in, we get that back on, and then we'll screw our filter housing back up. Okay, so we screw the filter in, screw the filter housing back up. Don't go mad tightening this up. Tighten your drain plug up. Now it needs to go into the engine bay. So we get the car down, get in the engine bay for the bleeding. There's no pump in these tanks, so we need to bleed up to the pump in the engine bay. If you don't bleed the pump, you can damage the pump. So let's go up to the engine bay and start the bleeding. Okay, so we're now in the engine bay. Take that top cover off. Now this is the pump. This is the feed tube to the pump. You can see we have a bleed Schrader valve here just before the pump. Now, the problem most people have now is they've changed their filter. They get in, they start the car, it'll run for 10-15 seconds and then die, and then you will not be able to get it started again. This engine is quite common for it. Now, the line we're looking for, if you haven't got a Schrader valve to bleed up to the pump, doesn't really make much difference, because at the minute we've got air, this tube that runs into the pump will have introduced air. So we need to remove this tube and hook a vacuum up to this return line. Now this return line is the return from the pump and from the injectors, so essentially it will drag the air out. We need to get it until it's got clean fuel coming through. Now, we've got tools to be able to do it here as well, to get the fuel up to here. If you haven't, you can just go off this tube, this return line. So, we get this hooked up, and then we'll suck the fuel through, and go from there. Okay, so, we got Schrader valve attached to vacuum pump here. You can see this is the feed tube to the pump. The air is being drawn up from the filter housing. Now, you'll need to wait quite a while to get the air out. So you need clean fuel up to the pump, up to here. And in theory, when you release the Schrader valve, the fuel should stay in there, and then we can move to the return line. As you can see, there's a lot of air to be taken out. It takes quite a while to fill that bowl. So we'll leave this on running until we get clean fuel up here. Once you've got clean fuel up here, you can look at taking the return line off. You can do this obviously with a hand primer, with an attachment. You have to make up a few little hoses to go under here. Just keep pumping, priming until you don't get air in this tube. So we'll continue on, and then we'll come back when we're ready to move to the next tube. Right, now see we've got clean fuel in our tube, clean fuel coming out. So we know to this point we've got good fuel. So now if we disconnect our Schrader valve, the fuel will stay at some point in this tube, and then we'll move on to our return line and hopefully suck the rest of the air out through the pump and then down the return line. So we'll get our Schrader valve off. This should stay. Might get a couple of air bubbles, but not to worry. As soon as that Schrader valve is disconnected, this pipe should stay with fuel at least up to here. So we get this disconnected and we'll look up over here. Right, so Schrader valve disconnected, the fuel has stayed in this line. You can see we've got an air pocket up here in this corner, which we now need to drag through and out the return line. So return line with the red tab, the smaller one of the two pipes, pop, push the big tabs in the back, pop out the red front. It should then lift up. There will be a little bit of fuel in here. Lift it up, put it out of the way. Connect the vacuum pump, hand primer, whatever, to this tube. Now when we vacuum, we should see the fuel flow through the pump. We should get clean fuel coming out of here. Not until we get clean fuel coming out of here, we know the pump's primed. Give it a few pumps. Obviously if you're doing this with a hand primer, it'll take a little bit longer. You can see the fuel coming out. However, that will turn into air because all you're doing at the minute is sucking out the fuel that's already in that tube before the pump. You should, if you look closer, I don't know if you can see it on camera, you should see fuel start to be dragged through the tube. And when we get clean fuel out of here, we know it's primed. So we'll wait until we get clean fuel out and come back. Okay, so once you've siphoned your fuel through, so it's clean fuel going up here, clean fuel coming out here, connect up your pipe again. You should fire up first time and keep running. Revs up for a little while, just to bleed any excess air, but should keep running. About dying off. And that's how you do your fuel filter, bleed it on the 2 litre Mondeo.